Welcome back to Federal Gaming Law. We're going over the basics, part 2. As we'll do in a lot of classes, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap. And then we're going to head back into new content. So yeah, we talked about a lot of different forms of gambling. We've got lottery gambling, games of chance, sports wagering, bookmaking. Lottery and games of chance have those 3 elements. Usually,
Write this down.
Okay, not reading my handwriting.
Oh, God.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then we talked about the valuable consideration theory, Cud v. Aschenbrenner. Again, that grocery store promotion where you didn't have to pay to play. You could just go to the store, get your entry, and you had to be there to win. And the court said, no, that's not consideration. The participants aren't parting with anything of value. Then we had Seattle Times, the football contest, where the court said, well, even though you don't have to pay to play the contest because you can enter for free, the effort that you have to put in to play is sufficient consideration for a contract, a binding set of rules. Therefore, if you have enough consideration for a contract, consideration is present. Clearly there's prize, clearly there's chance. And the court prohibited that promotion. And then you had Troy Amusement, bank nights. If you ever do research on gaming and you're doing some kind of a formal letter for somebody, you're going to run across bank night cases. There are a lot of them between the 30s and the 50s. And what these contests were is that you could often run by theaters. You could go to the theater, and if you bought a ticket, you would get an entry into a contest. You could also go to the theater and at the ticket booth, ask for a free entry and then wait outside the theater until the drawing occurs. Now, usually the drawing is going to occur after a movie or in the middle of a double feature. You're not quite sure. And the drawing will occur and the winner will be announced. And from the time of the announcement, the winner has 3 minutes to get to the stage. Now, if you're in the theater and the announcement's made, it's pretty easy to get up to the stage within 3 minutes. But if you're not in the theater, then the person who makes the announcement has to walk through the theater, off the stage, through the theater, through the concession area, through the ticket area, outside, announce it again, but the clock's already been running. That person has to come through the crowd, get to the ticket booth, go through the ticket booth, through the concession area, through the theater, and up to the stage. And they're clearly at a disadvantage. And in this case, the court said, well, you, the promoter, are getting some benefit. You're getting increased sales from this, as admitted by the promoter. And therefore, there's consideration for a gambling analysis. You have consideration, chance of prize. This is a game of chance. And under that promoter benefit theory. So you have these 3 theories of consideration: valuable consideration, contract consideration, promoter benefit. And probably the best short synopsis of promoter benefit is encapsulated in that Wisconsin statute. Consideration in the subsection means anything that is a commercial or financial advantage to the promoter or disadvantage to the participant. Now, again, with valuable consideration and contract consideration, you're really only looking at it from the point of view of the players, not from the point of view of the promoter. So when you have consideration, chance, and prize, what have you got? A game of chance, or if it's pure chance, then it's a lottery. You take out the consideration element, and what do you have? Sweepstakes. But if it's free, what does free really mean? Does it mean nobody pays? Does it mean you don't have to pay? What do you think? Courtney?
I think it's just like a not like there might be a slight burden, but like a nominal.
Yeah, in some places. It kind of varies from state to state. In some states, what's called an alternative free method of entry, or an AMOE, will eliminate the element of consideration for a gambling analysis. Now, that doesn't mean in every state, just in some states. So to qualify as an alternative free method of entry that eliminates consideration, it must meet something called the equal dignity rule. It really means that free entry must have equal dignity with entries that are associated with a purchase. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the method of entry can't be more onerous. So you can't say, well, you're going to get an entry with purchase of, for example, if it's a fast food restaurant, with the purchase of a drink, you get a free entry. You can't say, well, if other people want an entry without a purchase, you got to send a self-addressed stamped envelope to us in North Dakota. We'll send you back a form. You send it back to us, and then we'll send you an entry piece. It can't be more onerous. It's got to be roughly the same method of entry. You can't have people entering online with a purchase, but requiring free participants to jump through a bunch of hoops to enter. The free method has to have the same opportunity to win as the paid methods. Anybody remember Publishers Clearinghouse? One of the problems they got into was that they used to send these flyers out. I don't know if they still do. I don't get one, but they sent a flyer out, and you can either buy magazines and get an entry where the flyer goes to like New York or Chicago or something like that. The entry goes there, and it says you'll be entered immediately upon receipt. And then there's the free method, which goes to like Minot, North Dakota. And once we check your entry form for completeness, then we'll send it on to New York or Chicago for entry, clearly indicating or implying that if you don't pay to play, you don't have the same opportunity to win. And they ended up paying a lot of fines on that. And then you've got the prize. It has to be the same prize. It can't be one pool for people that enter with a purchase or associated with a purchase, and another prize for those that don't. And the claiming of the prize has to be about the same. So what the equal dignity rule is trying to do is take the profit motive out of running a sweepstakes, at least from the participants. Does that make sense? All right, let's take a look at some contest rules. We'll come back to this, but let me. This is why PowerPoint crashed. Because I had changed the links. So let's do Rocket Mortgage first. Share Rocket Mortgage. Can everybody see that? So Rocket Mortgage has a contest. It's a sweepstakes. Let's see the rules, the official rules. And what do you see right at the top of the official rules? No purchase or payment of any kind is necessary to enter or win. A purchase or payment will not increase your chances of winning. Clearly aimed at trying to meet the equal dignity rule. Let's look at how to enter. Visit the website and enter an email address, regardless of how you enter. That's how you, regardless of whether you're purchasing a product from Rocket Mortgage or not, that's it. You can add additional squares by posting on your Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter account that you've entered. Those are just additional entries. Again, doesn't cost you anything. How to claim a prize. No difference based upon how you're entering. Same process for claiming a prize. And then you've got all the other stuff that's traditionally rules. Let's take a look at another one. This one's from SiriusXM. Win a chance for a trip to the Super Bowl in Los Angeles. Big game giveaway. Da, da, da. Here's how you enter. Well, let's take a look at the official rules. See anything similar? No purchase necessary to enter or win. A purchase will not increase your chances of winning. Winner and guest will be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Final dose 14 days before the event to attend. Additional health measures may be required. But it's open only to Sirius subscription subscribers with an active trial, paid, or ad-supported subscription. This gets interesting because it just said no purchase is required, but I guess you could get a trial period for free. So it's getting a little closer to the line. You at least have to try out their service. Interesting. But again, eligibility, no difference depending on how you enter. One set of prizes, not two sets of prizes, one for free entrance and one for those that actually subscribe. Retail value $6,500, which makes it interesting because eligibility, United States, District of Columbia, or Puerto Rico, which means that they've bonded in New York and Florida, which is interesting. Let's see. Yeah, pretty much the same stuff. But what you'll notice is that you don't have to pay to play, and they make it clear that purchase will not increase your chances of winning. Let's take a look at a different promotion. Back to PowerPoint, everybody. What about this one? So you can win a, again, this is about 5 years old now. But you can win a Civic Type R, which when it came out was a really, really hot car, hard to get. And the car dealership is All Star Honda, and they're going to sell a maximum of 100 tickets at $500 each. They're going to have a drawing, and the winner wins. You see the small print down at the bottom? Minimum of 75 tickets must be sold. 75 tickets are not sold. Refunds will be issued. Winner's responsible for taxes and fees. No limit to the amount of tickets purchased by each individual. Cash, check, and credit card are accepted. What do you think? Got a prize? Oh, Courtney. Good.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I definitely think it's like a pay to play type scenario.
Yeah, it is. There's no free entry. That car retails, I want to say, for $35,000 to $40,000 roughly. So if they sell 100 tickets, how much are they going to bring in? going to bring in $50,000. Great haul if they can if they can sell it at 50 grand. By the way, this contest didn't go off as planned. As you might guess, other Honda dealers in the area were a little upset and called the sheriff on this one. So every once in a while, you run across a promotion like this. You think, what are they thinking? When the economy turns down, you'll see realtors trying things like this. Because the value of houses goes down, people are underwater, realtors still need to sell houses, and they'll get these brilliant ideas. Well, we'll do a contest, we'll do a raffle, and people can enter for a couple $100. Somebody's going to win the house, and we won't run the raffle until we sell X amount of tickets, which gets you out from underwater and above, and I'll get my percentage, and everybody's happy, right? Not exactly. Law enforcement's not too happy. So you'll see this from time to time. If the economy does take a downturn, I'm sure you'll see more of these. It's a great way to make money. Problem is, you got all the elements of a game of chance. So let's talk about chance. So for those of you that are new to gaming or gaming luck versus, how would you distinguish chance from skill, or how would you describe chance? No ideas? Alex?
I mean, I guess with skill, I guess in contrast to chance, in theory, you have some slightly more control over the outcome potentially versus a game of chance.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a game of skill, or if it's an event of skill, you have some control over the outcome. That's a great way to describe it, because gambling often is described as risking something of value for the opportunity to win a prize based upon the outcome of an uncertain event. Uncertain meaning you don't have any control over it, or at least you don't have significant control over it. And that's a pretty good description. Skill is, the application of some influence over the outcome. But for gambling analysis, we have a couple of different tests. We actually have 3 or 4. So one that you'll see a lot is called the dominant factor test. This is the prevailing test. Most states use this test. Most federal courts will use this test. And under this test, you kind of think of a continuum. Let's just pull up the illustration. So you've got chance, which is kind of beyond the player's control. And you've got skill, those elements that are actually controlled by the player. And if the outcome of the game is determined more based upon skill of the player than it is by elements beyond the player's control, then you have a game of skill. Otherwise, you have a game of chance. So let's use some examples. Say a slot machine. On that continuum, that teeter-totter of chance and skill, where do you think a slot machine ends up? Courtney?
Like heavily chance, you have zero control. You just push the button or pull the lever.
It tips all the way over there, right? Chance really. Now, having said that, anybody ever play a slot machine?
Yeah.
You ever see a slot machine with a stop button on it? What does that stop button do? Anybody know?
Nothing.
It shortens the time to seeing the result. It doesn't change the result. The result is determined the second you hit spin. or pull the lever. Everything after that is an entertaining display. You hit the stop button, it just shortens the entertaining display. That hasn't stopped people from arguing that, well, this is a game of chance. We've got a stop button on it now. And you'll see this from time to time, particularly in jurisdictions where gambling is illegal. All forms are illegal, or most forms. And every few years, you'll get some police enforcement on this. Lewis.
Yeah, sorry if this isn't exactly on topic, but
Sure.
with the slot machines, I know that there's a certain ratio or percentage that they have to pay out. Out of like 100% or whatever, paying out maybe 4% or something like that. Is that per cabinet or per, like, how's that determined? Is it per actual game or perhaps per series of games?
Sure, the theoretical win. In most jurisdictions, there's a minimum theoretical win, usually like 94, 87, something like that. Most operators operate machines with a higher theoretical win than the minimums that are published. But the theoretical win is based upon a mathematical analysis of the game itself over the expected lifetime of the game. But it's just that, it's theory. So, for example, if the game has 10 potential outcomes, it's one reel, it's got 10 symbols and one wins, one's a winning symbol. And if it's truly random, you would expect that winning symbol would show up 1 in 10 times. And if it's got a 100% payback, well, then, you've got a machine that's paying back at least at that level. Add more paying icons to it, and the game starts to increase its payout. In theory. In practice, you could pull that lever on that one reel slot machine 10,000 times and never win. But at least in theory, mathematical theory, it should pay out, at 90%. Make sense?
Yeah, so it's not like for every 100 spins,
No.
you're going to lose 95. It's theoretically.
It's purely theoretical because
okay.
in theory, the random number generator should really be random. Anybody remember I think it was called the Lions slot machine over at MGM? They had a slot machine that was put in, I think, in the 80s as part of a bank of slot machines, and it had a progressive. Now, you can't pull progressive machines out entirely until the progressive is hit. And they had pulled out every other machine on that bank except one. And it had this astronomical progressive. And people would line up to play this machine for years and years because it had never hit. Let's see if I can find a quick article on that. It'll make it a lot more interesting than me just droning out about it. Here we go. I gotta accept the cookies. And let's switch the share. So in 2014, allow. The lion's share slot machine finally hit. The machine had been there for 15 years and never hit. And it finally paid out $2.4 million off of its progressive. So in theory, it has that at least, I think it was 92% payback in theory. But boy, it took it a long time to get there. So these things do happen from time to time. And it was, quite a phenomenon for quite a while. You'd see all these people lined up to play an old slot machine. And then they get, upset when somebody was playing forever on it. So, because lines did form. So yeah, slot machines, definitely chance. Random number generator based games, chance. What about blackjack? You have any control over blackjack? What do you think? Game of skill, game of chance on the predominance test? Is the outcome controlled more by skill or more by the lay of the cards? Courtney.
I think we talked about this like last class, that you have more of an influence, but it's still considered a game of chance because ultimately you're going to be dealt whatever cards you're going to be dealt.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is there some skill involved? Yeah. You get 2 10s, don't hit. Right? That's a skill. You got to count to 21. Depending on the time of night, what you may or may not have ingested or drank or smoked or whatever, counting to 21 could be a challenge. But by and large, it's how the cards come out that determine whether you're winning or not. Anybody know the house advantage of blackjack? What's the advantage the house has over players?
Is it like 2.6 or something? Something like that, right?
Yeah, percentage-wise. Do you know why? Anybody ever play blackjack?
It's just the way the math works out. I don't know, exactly why.
So let's say I'm the dealer and I deal you 2 cards and you get a 2 and a 10. What are you going to do?
You're gonna hit. Oh, it's because it's the rules of the game, like the soft 17, right? Is that the advantage?
No, the advantage is, all right, let's say I give you a card and it's a 10. So now you got 22. Have you lost?
Yes.
Yeah. Dealer has a 10 and a 3. Dealer has to hit, dealer gets a 10. Have you still lost?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the advantage. You bust first. Even though the house busts, the house still won. So, is what it is. But that's the advantage that the house has. Players bust first. So maybe the house busts and loses to 1 player, and there are 5 people on the table, and it wins on 4. So dominant factor test on poker. What do you think? Anybody ever play poker? Well, Courtney.
Yeah, this is, I think, again, we talked about it last time. Like people try to say that it's skill and it is like a lot more strategy and stuff, but it's still ultimately chance because you can't control the cards.
Right. You get Delta Royal, you get Delta Royal. Your opponent gets Delta Royal, they get Delta Royal. Is there some skill involved? Absolutely. But every court that's taken a look at it with a reliable court opinion has said it's a game of chance. Now, if you're dealing with a poker zealot, they're going to bring up something called the D. Christina case out of New York. But D. Christina, the district court basically said, in a matter where there was a prosecution, you didn't give us any evidence whatsoever regarding poker as a game of skill or chance. The defense has given us lots of information that poker is a game of skill. Therefore, balancing out the evidence, we think it's a game of skill. Now that was appealed, and the appeals court said, no, the prosecutor doesn't have to discuss skill or chance because poker is a named game that's illegal in this state. You know, the fact that they didn't provide any evidence one way or the other is irrelevant because they don't have to. Now, there are two other court opinions I'm aware of where poker was deemed to be a game of skill. One was in South Carolina, I think, in a municipal court where a poker game was broken up by the police in somebody's garage. And the county sheriff was one of the players in the poker game. And the court, in that instance, said, well, the sheriff's not guilty of a gambling crime under municipal statutes or nuisance because poker is clearly a game of skill. No analysis. Just, we're not going to throw the sheriff in jail for holding a poker game. Another one from the Deep South, similar circumstances, public official holding a poker game in his garage, gets loud and rowdy, neighbors call, arrests are made. And judge in that case said, well, there's a book called Poker for Dummies. Therefore, if you can learn about it, it must be a game of skill. Now, I should note that there is a slots for dummies as well. I don't think that turns slot gaming into skill, but again, you got a public official, municipal court. Other than that, every significant court has found poker to be a game of chance. You know, you can be the best poker player in the world, but you know, if you're dealt garbage hands consistently, you're just not gonna do well. And that happens. And then you have guys like Chris Moneymaker. Anybody familiar with him? No poker.
Yeah, he was just like a regular dude who ended up winning the World Series of Poker main event in the early 2000s and then kind of devoted his life to poker after that.
Exactly. He had learned how to play a few weeks before, won an entry online, and then won the World Series of Poker, and then proceeded to win no major tournaments after that. But he had a big name. You know, if it's so skillful, then you know a guy that walks in after a couple of weeks learning the game probably shouldn't dominate the biggest. And he made some crazy bets. I mean, just crazy stuff. But poker, yeah, some skill in managing your money, skill in bluffing, skill in trying to read other players to see if they're bluffing. But by and large, the cards ultimately control who wins and game of chance. What about billiards? 8-ball, 9-ball. Oh, Courtney had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like the house advantage in poker, if there is one. I've heard since they're like more playing against everyone at the table, they don't really have much of an advantage, but I don't know. Can you tell us?
House has no advantage in poker. House takes a rake. They take a percentage of the pot. And when I first moved to town, poker rooms were being torn out as fast as they could be torn out because poker games are slow. I think the rake is usually what, 10%? And a slow game with a 10% rake is a waste of space. And the poker tape rooms weren't full. Fast forward a few years, and you have the writer's strike on TV, you know, for TV writers, and reality TV becomes a thing because you don't need writers for reality TV, at least in theory. Well, you know what else is reality TV? Poker games. And they're cheap to produce. And so poker ends up on TV, online poker starts to become a thing, and poker rooms get put back in casinos because they're popular. We're down on the other side of that now. Poker rooms are becoming fewer and fewer. It'll come back again. But no, the house doesn't have an advantage because the house isn't in the game. House just takes a rake or a service fee or a VIG for hosting and providing the dealer in the location. So what about billiards? Did we ever shoot pool, 9-ball, 8-ball? Got a couple people shaking their heads. What do you think, Alex?
I mean, definitely in comparison to like poker and blackjack and slot machines, it would be more on the skill side of the continuum.
Yeah, and if you're looking at what is more influential in determining the outcome, do you think it's chance of the balls moving around, or do you think it's the skill of the player in directing where those balls go?
I mean, I think there's definitely more skill involved in terms of your control, of how you strike it, what angle you do it at, and all that.
Yeah. Courts are largely in agreement. Billiards generally comes out as a game of skill. Very few court opinions otherwise. There's a wonderful court opinion. I can't remember out of which state, but there's a prosecution going on where the prosecutor, district attorney, is trying to prosecute a pool shark for conducting a gambling game. And the judge turns to the district attorney and says, if you think this is a game of chance, why don't you bet your paycheck with him on a game of pool? And the DA said, no way, I'll lose. He said, exactly. You can't beat a good pool player. Is there some chance? Yeah. If you're playing 8-ball, can you get an 8-ball break? It happens, but it's rare. More often than not, you're not going to get the 8-ball break. And that game is determined by the skill of the player. So yeah, billiards, pretty classic game that has skill and chance, but skill of the players really is the biggest factor in determining the outcome. What about billiards? I'm sorry, what about chess? I don't know why I put billiards on the top of the screen, but what do you think? Chess, skill, chance?
Skill.
Yeah, skill. When you control all the movements, it's skill. That's often identified as the ultimate game of skill. I mean, do I have any hope of beating a chess master? I'll tell you right now, I don't. I probably couldn't beat one of those little chess games that you could buy, at truck stops. It's electronic. No, I mean, there's no way I could beat somebody that's skilled at chess. What about another game? What about Madden? Anybody ever play Madden? We'll talk about it in a little bit. Back to the laws and different tests to distinguish skill and chance. Another one is called the gambling instinct test. This one doesn't look really at the relative skill and chance so much as it looks at whether the game appeals to your gambling instinct. What do you think a gambling instinct is?
The ability to forego a guaranteed conclusion to risks a greater conclusion.
Yeah.
As part of the game.
Yeah, Dylan, I think you're dead on. Chance to, you take a chance on paying a little to get a lot back. Or get more back. Now, where we see this often is in relation to machines. So let me show you a machine, often pinball machines. So after World War I and World War II, prior to World War I, the US was pretty insular. Actually, even prior to World War II, we still were. I think Roosevelt first got elected on a platform of isolationism. But when our GIs came back from overseas, they brought all sorts of new games back with them. And they brought certain pinball machines back, and then we've kind of Americanized them. This is a baseball pinball machine. And we'll see a video a little bit later on showing you how one of these works. But courts were kind of struggling with this because, you do have a plunger on the side. Anybody ever play pinball? Handful of people. Go to the pinball museum. Try one out. You do have some control over the plunger, which sends the ball into play. And courts weren't sure what to do with it, and then you've got other things like this. Anybody recognize this game? Yeah, it's a pusher. You can find these at Chuck E. Cheese or GameStop, and you can find them at Mirage. You could also find them in bars from time to time. This one, I think this is a picture from Fry's, which is now closed. Have you ever seen this game or games like this? Yeah, I mean, it's got a stop button, but it doesn't stop immediately, one, and I think the outcome is pretty well known beforehand. This is a game that a lot of GIs came back with back in the 1940s and 50s from Japan. Anybody ever see one of these? It's a pachinko machine. Japanese pinball became popular for a while. It's still very, very popular in Japan, but we'll take a look at a video for that too. It's changed a lot from these old style machines. And of course, pinball as we know it. All these things were, courts kind of struggled with, particularly in the South. And the gambling instinct test was used to determine whether these were gambling games or not in some places. So this is baseball. As a kid, I remember this in bars. I grew up in Wisconsin. When I was growing up, the drinking age was 18. But the age to be in a bar didn't exist. So, I could be in grade school, ride my bike to a bar and play games in the bar with friends. Rest of the nation, not so much. But there, and we didn't know any different. So there were games like this still in bars back in the 1970s. So let's take a look at one of these games. Let's take a look at this one. This is a flipperless pinball machine. And is it embedded or not? Yeah, it'll work.
All right, guys, here's a quick video of Beach Queens by Valley. This is a flipperless, and here we go. I'll do one video of just playing, and then I'll do another video of the insides of it. The object of the game is you want to hit as many bumpers as possible. If you hit up to 6 girls, you get 2 free credits. They call them skill points, which is nice. Not credits, skill points.
Yeah, skill
7
points.
girls, 4 credits. 8 girls, 8 credits, which is weird. 9 is 20 credits, and 11 is 100 credits. Also, by the value of how many points and how many times you hit the side bumpers also increases the credits. So here we go. Put the dime in the box. Ready to go. So there's 3 shots you really want to hit. First one is if you hit the 1, then you can hit everything else. You want to try to get that one first. If you miss that, the next shot is hit this double light, and then everything doubles. And also the center one. If you land in there right now, you get girl number 1 and 7. And this changes every time you hit something. Now you can see I got slingshots here. So the slingshots kind of help out a little bit. It's a weird mechanism in the slingshot. It's not your typical slingshot mechanism, which I'll show later. There's the 1, that's good. Goes. Oh, reindeer. hole. Let's see here. We got 2, 4, 6, plus I got 6,000 points. So I got a total of 20 credits. So I added it up. There we go. That was good. All right, so that was 4 girls. Anyway, so there you go. Now now that you have the credits added up, I got 19 credits left. I can just keep playing here, which is nice. But I'll show you.
But in bars, you can also cash those credits out. So you put a dime in, you got 19 credits back. You can take your dime and cash it in for $1.90 now. Or what you spent. You spend a dime, you get tickets out, $1.90 comes out, or you get to cash that in at the bar. Now, again, when these things came out, you could probably do this at nickel beer night. That's a lot of beer for $1.90. I don't think anybody does nickel beer night anymore, right? At least not around here. That kind of faded out by the 80s, I think. But you kind of get the idea. And courts would say, this is gambling. You don't really have any control over the ball once you use the plunger. And companies like Bally would say, oh, no, it's a skill game. It's, you got to pull that plunger back just right, and you can hit them all if you do it. But the truth is, no. The courts didn't know how to quantify this, so they started using this gambling instinct test. Let's get past this again.
All right.
Embedded videos are different. Here's another one. Flipperless pinball. And in this one, you're trying to get like a set of bingo winnings. There's different bingo cards on the top there. Every time the ball lands in a spot, it shows up there. And you need to get a pattern of, cross or diagonal. And you get credits. You can cash the credits out later. At least you could in most bars. Again, skill. Yeah, there's some chance. Seems to be quite a bit of that too. Of course, just didn't want to deal with that, so they looked at the game as under that gambling instinct test. Pachinko. Anybody familiar with Pachinko? No? Let's show you Pachinko. There'll be some old ones and some new ones in here. I went to Japan a couple of years ago and went to a Pachinko parlor. They're really loud. They're very popular. And as somebody who is clearly not Japanese, I was followed through the place closely everywhere I went. I'll show you what Pachinko looks like, at least in Japan. So again, busy places, they're kind of loud. Unlike American casinos, they're really well lit, they're really bright. But it's that fluorescent type light, as you can see. This is a modern Pachinko machine. Again, these are all YouTube videos, so you can see for yourself. And with Pachinko is you get ball bearings. And again, same idea. Plunger, it goes up, there are a bunch of pins. In the Pachinko parlors, if you win more ball bearings. Which means you can play some more. Or you can take your ball bearings back to a prize center and get a little prize. Depending on how many ball bearings you have. And after you get your little prize, it's not worth a whole lot. There is also a prize redemption business adjacent to the pachinko parlor, where now your little stuffed animal that you got for 5,000 ball bearings is now suddenly worth a few $100s. And they take it back, and then it goes back into the prize pool of pachinko ball. You can kind of see, you just keep hitting that lever, shooting balls up in there, and the game kind of plays itself. Now, modern machines, you see like there's a reel in the middle. So they look a lot like slot machines. So this is a more traditional looking one. One of the ball bearings are dropping off. Crazy loud. But, I can't fast forward it. You cash out and you get this little prize. But then there's this little window in a little office nearby, and you can take your prize and turn it into cash. Now, pachinko's been tried here too. This is a relatively new ad. And North Carolina's a wild state on this stuff, so.
Come play at Pachinko World. More fun than sweepstakes. We have many games to choose from. Win a jackpot on one of our many games of skill. Located near Target at 5101 Dunlea Court, Wilmington. Call 910-859-6603 for more info. You could be our next super jackpot winner. Pachinko World. Open 7 days a week in the Dunlea Court Center near Aussie Island Surf Shop.
Notice how they identified it as game of skill. The truth is, there's really no skill at pachinko. There isn't. And this location, I believe, was shut down. And you also heard more fun than sweepstakes. In North Carolina, and I guess I should explain this too, and other states, particularly in the South, there were businesses set up as quote unquote sweepstakes locations that were basically internet cafes where you paid for your time on the machines, the computers, like you would at an internet cafe anywhere. But the only thing you could reach were these sweepstakes. And the sweepstakes were basically online slots. But you didn't pay per spin, you paid per hour or per minute to be on that machine. And then you might or you might not win a prize. The prizes would be paid out right there at the sweepstakes outlet. Now, the truth is you had to pay for they said, well, the games are free, but you're paying for your time to be on the computer. And that was just, it's a fiction. And the only way to play is to pay for computer time. That's part of the deal. And these kept popping up. North Carolina finally passed a law prohibiting all that. In Florida, it had a major impact, or at least it had an impact on state politics because a lieutenant governor was involved in one of these schemes. Didn't seem to hurt the party there at all, but anyway, gambling instinct. Again, some courts use it, particularly with machines, and that's why. Because you have these machines that have elements of both, maybe it's arguable, and courts will just not apply another test. They'll apply that gambling instinct. Then you have some states that have material element or any chance, and I think this is pretty much the same thing, material element or any chance, although I have colleagues that seem to see a distinction here. I don't. And here, for this test, the relative amount of skill versus chance is irrelevant. If the game has any level of chance that is material in determining the outcome, it's deemed to be a game of chance. So here's an example. Anybody familiar with Golden Tees? Golden Tees is a golf simulation game. Credible Technologies has had two reputable universities, University of Illinois, Northwestern University, both run analysis on the games, and both have said mathematically, this is a game of skill. There are chance elements in it, but it's predominantly a game of skill. And skill dominates the outcome. All the machines are kept in virtually the same condition. And if parts wear or become outside the tolerance, the game is tilted. A technician comes out, fixes the machine. Player funds on those tilted machines are returned. And they run some pretty significant tournaments. Entry fees of $100 or more. These machines are networked nationally. You see them in bars in lots of places. And tournament winners can win valuable prizes. And again, these machines are located in lots of places throughout the United States. How do you play? Well, primarily through a trackball. You start the game with some buttons. You can adjust camera angles with buttons, but the swing is all based on how you move that trackball. What kind of spin you put on it, what kind of angle you have on it. And again, is it a game of skill or chance? Under the predominance test, what do you think? Or the dominant factor test? Courtney?
I think under that test, probably it's a game of skill, just, judging by the universities that ran these studies and what they said.
Oh, that's exactly it. And there have been a number of opinions that say, yeah, under the dominant factor test or predominance test, this is a game of skill. Dallin?
Do courts have a consistent definition for the word chance? Because
No.
it's a bizarre word. Like, the PGA Tour, you have a lot of players teeing off, and then you get a weather, the weather's going to change midday. That's chance. Like, that's
Yeah. Well, and there's a great quote in a case, I think it's out of South Carolina, about a golf tournament where in South Carolina, I believe, is a material element state or any chance state. And basically they took a judge off the bench for participating in a golf tournament where you pay to play to win. And well, you pay to play, and then at the end there's a drawing. You can win things like new golf clubs and some cash. And they used a quote from Tiger Woods saying that, yeah, golf, hitting the ball is skill. Where and how it lies is anybody's guess and pure chance. Because you can strike a ball really well, but you don't know if that particular area where it lands has a little bit of a divot in it, or a depression, or if it rained there recently. And the lie is going to be the lie. May roll in and end up next to a bush or something.
What's this bottom part here? Hold on.
So, it can vary. But you're right, with golf generally is deemed to be a game of skill, but there are a few court opinions that say it's a game of chance. But it depends on the test that you're using. Now, can I beat Tiger Woods in a golf game? No. Anybody play golf?
yeah, badly, poorly.
Yeah, same here. You got to play a lot to be good. You have to have, I have hit a hole in one once, but that's because I hit a paved cart path. The ball bounced so high that it ended up not only on the green but in the hole.
Still counts, man.
It does. Yeah, I was playing with I was part of a foursome, and we were looking around for my ball, and one guy's like, "Hey, I found it. It's in the hole." You serious? Sure enough. But no, I'd say I'm a third-rate duffer, but that's not fair to the other third-rate duffers. I'm bad. But yeah, golf, yeah, changes in weather conditions, things like that. There are a lot of chance elements in a golf game or a golf tournament. And those get simulated in Golden Tees as well. Golden Tees has sudden gusts of wind. There are some chance elements. And Golden Tee was pretty aggressive about rolling these things out. And they asked for attorney general opinions in certain states. And in certain states where they couldn't get a good opinion, they lobbied to have the law changed. So you'll see in some states there's an exemption for golf simulators. And that's this. Well, they went to Alaska. And in Alaska, the attorney general issued an opinion. Now, Alaska at one time had a court opinion. Ooh, that color did not work out well here. At least not on Zoom. Alaska had a court opinion that said it was a dominant factor test, but the legislature went back and changed the definition of gambling. And they changed it to include a game or contest in which the outcome is dependent to a material degree on chance, even if skill is also a factor, or a future contingent event not under the player's control and influence. So what the attorney general said is, we've changed the standard. The old standard was dominant factor. The new standard is this material element test. And he said, because of that, we have to take a look at your game under this material element test. And the attorney general said that he doesn't doubt that skill is the dominant factor in determining the outcome of these games. But that's not the test we use here. And the question is, does chance play a material role? And it does. So in this instance, even though this is a game statistically dominated by chance, we think it's illegal under current Alaska law because chance plays a material role. And there are a number of states like this. New York is a state. In fact, they cite New York in this opinion as being the model for this statutory change. Lewis.
Yeah, I know New York, when they were deciding on daily fantasy sports, right? Use sort of the sort of like any chance
Right.
test, right? But didn't daily fantasy get pushed through? Was it because there was a vote on it?
Yeah, what the daily fantasy sites did is what Incredible Technologies had done in other states, is they lobbied the legislature for an exemption under the gambling law for their product. And in New York, they were successful.
But it's unlikely you'd see that with any sort of other sort of gambling, like traditional gambling, probably.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely. But again, in for example, Iowa, there's an exemption under the state gambling prohibitions for golf simulations. Not for any other games, just for golf simulations that meet certain criteria. And the criteria are basically, it's a Golden Tees machine. Likewise, in New York, the large daily fantasy companies lobbied to have daily fantasy regulated, put a big barrier to entry up that they could afford, but maybe a lot of other smaller operators couldn't afford, and moved it from an illegal game to one that's regulated and approved by the state. We'll get to New York and daily fantasy later in the course. But there's some question as to whether the legislature exceeded its authority in doing so. And there's a current case moving through the courts on that. And so far, DFS is lost. So, but we'll see. So with regard to the chance element, we do have one really, really good court opinion for you to take a look at. And that's the Supreme Court of Alabama's opinion regarding the topic. And they do a really, really good job of going through this. So what's the issue? Anybody read this one? Alex.
Well, sort of the main issue they're addressing is, I guess, that a court previously issued an advisory opinion to the legislature regarding a statute they were passing. And in the view of this opinion, they incorrectly said that under the statute would be permissible under the state's constitution, but they said, no, the state constitution is very broadly sort of construed to be against sort of these games of chance and lottery. So they very much affirmed this, the dominant factor test.
Yep. No, that's exactly it. So, back in the 90s, there was a move to, particularly by coin op operators, people that put jukeboxes and coin operated billiards tables and things like that in bars, to put video slot machines or video poker machines in. And the argument was, well, these are games of skill, just like the pool tables. And the Supreme Court of Alabama did issue an advisory opinion, but they got it wrong. And so they took it up again and actually went through a thorough analysis. And they started taking a look at the historical analysis of skill versus chance. And they talked about the American test versus, I think, the European or British test. And really, in the United States, the dominant test is the dominant factor test. And that's the test that Alabama adopts here. So, legislatures provide the statutes, the courts interpret them. If there's no discussion in the statute about where that line for skill and chance lies, then it's up to the courts to decide. And in Alabama, it's the dominant factor test. But they did go through all these other tests, describe what they are, and then provided some historical perspective for why things are the way they are. And it's a really good opinion. It's one that after you leave the confines of the law school, it's a good one to have in your files, on your computer somewhere. It's a really well-written opinion. But what they said is, that test that the court used originally, which is not the test that we use here, was that if skill plays any material role, that it's a game of skill, and that's not the test we use in the United States. We use, some states will use the opposite. If chance plays any role, it's a game of chance. But most states will use the dominant factor test, where skill has to dominate the determination of the outcome on which a prize is awarded for it to be a game of skill and excluded from gambling prohibitions. So let's take a look at a few other games. What about darts? Skill or chance? What do you think?
Skill.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Alex?
Yeah, I was going to say definitely leans more heavily towards skill.
But does it depend on the test that you use? I mean, dominant factor, I think it's clearly skill. What about in a material element state? Is there any chance involved in darts? Courtney?
I don't think so. I think it depends on how you throw it. I guess you could say that there's chance, if the dart's going to stick to the board, maybe.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that courts using the dominant factor test have come down differently on darts. So while the dominant factor test sounds real precise or, really objective, there's a big subjective element to that test. And one court said that, you're shooting at the dartboard. If it was pure skill, then everybody would hit the bullseye every time, or the skilled players would always hit the bullseye every time. And, it wouldn't be much of a game, particularly between skilled players. So, and another court said, well, everything's under the control of the player. And I think, the everything's under the control of the player is probably the right outcome, but you do have this difference of opinion. Lewis.
So like with the argument between with daily fantasy versus like season-long fantasy, and also like poker, like if you take like someone who's never played it before and put them against someone who's considered skill, like over time it should show the difference. I think with darts it would be like if you put someone who's never thrown a dart versus like a professional darts player, I think that would just show how much skill is actually involved in it. If that was the test.
Yeah, I agree. I think at least in part of that I agree with. I think with darts, clearly skilled players. I mean, when I was younger and single and hung out in bars, darts is pretty common, and you can get much better at darts. I mean, I had a friend that could hit a bullseye on command, and would occasionally just throw darts and kind of line it up and then not look at the board and just throw and triple 20, triple 20, triple 20 to start off with. Like, man, that's tough. So I think, but again, there was a court that found some element of chance in there. But I think by and large, game of skill under dominant factor. I think it's probably a game of skill even under material element. I don't think chance plays a whole lot of, much of a role here, but others can differ. Gambling instinct. What do you think? You paid $2 to enter a tournament with a $10,000 prize. Yeah, why not? Right? Yeah, that gambling instinct would probably fall. Depends on the things set up. What about golf? We talked about golf just a little bit. I don't know, I have like 5 minutes left, but Alex.
Yeah, I think, kind of like we talked about, I think under like the dominant factor test, it would be more so a game of skill in that sense, but definitely potentially, like you kind of mentioned, if it was perhaps a tournament or something with the material element test that, or the gambling instinct test, like that could certainly apply. And I think material element, depending on, I certainly think there's an argument to be made that it could be considered more so a game of chance under that.
Yeah, I think a material element, there are clearly chance elements in golf that have an influence over the outcome. What about a hole-in-one contest? That's golf, right?
Chance, definitely.
What's that?
I just said that's definitely chance and not a very good chance.
Yeah, you know what? Under the dominant factor test, courts have differed on hole-in-one contests. Some have come down and said, you know what? Skill is clearly the dominant factor in determining the outcome. And others have said, well, skill might be dominant in, your ability to hit the ball in a certain area, but certainly not with hitting it into the cup or rolling it into the cup on a hole-in-one contest. So courts differ on that. But I think by and large, general golf, dominant factor, game of skill, hole-in-one. I don't know. Anybody ever watch golf? Anybody have a parent that watches golf? Grandparent? How many holes in one do you see in a golf tournament? Even the professionals. Even in the par threes, you just don't see them very often. So, what about backgammon? Anybody play backgammon? No, backgammon is played. Well,
There's definitely some skill in backgammon.
yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of skill. Obviously, the dice themselves are going to be chance, but
Yep. There is some skill in backgammon. There's quite a bit of skill, actually. And there are large backgammon tournaments globally. Big money tournaments. There's an actor, you probably are all too young to remember, a guy named Omar Sharif that was, in addition to being an actor, was a particularly skilled backgammon player. But courts have differed on backgammon, even using the dominant factor test. Some will focus on the fact that dice are used, dice are random. If the rules don't go your way, even a skilled player is going to have difficulty or make it, it's going to be impossible to win. Others have said, while that's random, it's random within a certain parameter, and good players can use their skill to overcome a few bad rolls. And that's true. So courts, even though they're using a dominant factor test, have disagreed on backgammon. So, even though that, again, that test sounds real objective,